About you?
I'm doing
Hello everybody. Hello Aditya. Welcome to Bharat New Lillian. Bharat Ajmer joined LWC Learning. I
Hey,
hope.
Ishan.
Hello Aditya. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
We are doing good. Thank you. We are so glad to have you here, and our audience is slow increasing. And I'm so happy that we had an amazing audience and amazing speakers sharing their great knowledge on LWC Learning. And can't wait to give all the stage to you.
All right.
Yes, a very happy Loli and happy Makar Sankranti, everybody. Thank you all for joining on a festive day and taking time out for learning. Stay tuned. We have a lot of swags towards the end. Am I correct, Pal?
yes. So we will be very happy to share with you all, guys. So stay tuned till the end, and don't forget to spread out the word about all your learnings on Twitter and LinkedIn. I have all my eyes on Twitter, so hope to see you all in the tagging us, me, Isha, Aditya, and everybody out there. So I'll be posting all the Twitter handles and everything. So over to you, Isha.
Guys, if you don't know, Aditya is an LWC expert. Don't forget to ask your tough questions to him. Am I correct, Aditya?
I don't know if what is the word, but yeah, I will try my best to answer.
Definitely, I'm not scaring you at all. Okay, Aditya, go ahead. Let's see what all use cases and interesting stuff you have to deliver. Let me know if you're able to share the screen.
One second. Yeah, I can share.
Perfect.
Okay. So before we begin, I wanted to understand what all you have covered in the previous sessions.
So we had a couple of topics. I'll just open the link. Give me one moment. We covered with introduction why and environmental setup of LWC, and we created very first LWC component, properties and decorators of LWC, Apex integration with LWC, and overview of LDS, record API in LWC, and overview of communication between components. And yesterday, moving forward, it was communication between components.
Oh, okay. So did you already use any sample app when demoing all these features, or was it just a
So
normal demo?
all the speakers were different, and they kept with little bit of theory part, different apps they used, and worked around. So you can just have any example use case that you have on the slide. That would be great. Yeah.
Okay. So in that case, I will. Hmm. Okay, we'll see. If something feels repetitive, just stop me so that I can skip that. Um,
Fine, Aditya.
yeah.
We would love to hear.
All right. So okay, we will start. So yeah, before we begin, quick introduction about me. My name is Aditya. I've been working with Salesforce for the past 2.5 years as a developer advocate, um, which basically means I am the person in between you and the product. So whatever, let's say if you take LWC as an example, all the features of LWC, I will let you know. In case you have any feedback, you can let me know and I can take that to the product team and um, potentially get that incorporated, depending on how many people give the same feedback. So that's typically my role in a nutshell. You can follow me on Twitter and LinkedIn. I might be a little late in responding to direct messages on both the platforms, but I do respond. So if you have any questions that don't require urgent attention, then you can definitely ping on both of those platforms. If not, there are these huge developer forums, WhatsApp groups, Telegram channels, so many other ways in which you can reach out to get immediate responses. So yeah, feel free to reach out in case you want any advice. So traditionally, every Salesforce presentation starts with this statement where it says, I might make any forward-looking statements based on the knowledge I have of the current products being developed. But in case you are suggesting to your customers to purchase some products, then please make it only on publicly available information and not based on anything I might say today. So today, basically, the agenda is a sample use cases for Lightning Web Components. So I'm assuming all of you are beginners because this is kind of like a bootcamp session is what I was told. And depending on whatever topics that have been covered so far, I'm assuming everyone is a beginner. So I will try to see how I can give this presentation so that it benefits you. But one statement I would like to start off, and basically this is our guiding statement for all of this presentation as well as going forward. This is what you can keep in mind in case you want to learn about something. Explore open source apps and learn is the guiding statement that I would want to give you. The reason I say that is because let's say in all of the sessions that you've heard so far or anything that you might see, as a beginner, when you start off with, you first learn the syntax and then you see a very basic example of how things work. But you never really get to see that concept in action in a full-fledged application unless you implement it in a project. So open source apps are a way in which you can cross that barrier, because LWC was launched like 3 years ago. So there are hundreds and thousands of apps that people have already built. And some of them are open source. Typically, whatever we, at least my team, whatever we do, any sessions that we do, anything that we showcase is open source by default, the demos specifically. So that way you can look at how the app works, and then you can dive into the source code and see how things have been built and how different concepts have been put to use. I was given the word interesting, so I included a few interesting use cases. Hopefully those are interesting, but let's see. So, but basically this is the guiding statement in case any one of you, so some people reach out on Twitter and ask, okay, what is the best way to learn LWC? How do I look at practical use cases? And how do I practice? So other than on your live projects, you can definitely practice on your own. So people ask me, how can I practice these concepts? So what I generally recommend them is, we have the Salesforce App Exchange. I'm going to talk about it in a little while. But in general, Salesforce App Exchange has all of these ready-to-use apps, right? All of you know about that. You can just install and use it. So if you want to really learn, then you can actually look at an app, install it, see how it is working. Of course, apps from App Exchange, most of them are not open source. So you install the app, you see how it is working, and you try to replicate it, build it on your own. So that way, you know if you are able to build something that you are able to see on the screen. So that is also one of the recommendations I give. So typically, yes, because all of you are LWC beginners, explore open source apps to learn more. So one place that I would recommend all of you go to, and I'm assuming at least one speaker in all of the previous episodes would have covered this, because we work a lot on this, and some of these code samples have been referred to in the documentation as well. So basically, what we have is, with the launch of the new developer website, we have also launched these things called as Code Samples and Sdks. So it's a dedicated section on the website where I was talking about explore open source apps and learn, right? So this is that place where you can explore. The official repository of whatever Salesforce is giving you as a code sample is present in this place. So as I mentioned, everything is open source. I'm going to show you a demo in a while. So every single app that is there in Code Samples can be explored on GitHub. So the source code is all there. There are instructions on how you can deploy the app and use it. And we update it regularly, not all, but there is a subset of these code samples that my team takes care of. So we update that regularly with every release. So if a new release is coming out and we see that a new feature is going GA, we definitely try to incorporate that feature into these code samples. So at any given point of time, you can assume anything that new is coming out, anything old, new. There is going to be some or the other example in the code sample. And like I already mentioned, some of these apps is going to have instructions on how you can deploy and use on your own orgs. So with that, let's quickly see how you can access this Code Samples and SDK. So this is the official developer.salesforce.com website. So in that, if you go to build, that is where you'll find Code Samples and SDKs. And you will see a lot of them. This is a featured demo. We are going to look at this demo in a while. I'm assuming you would have looked at it at least once over the course of the past 4 days. But if not, I'm going to show it to you. So forget about the featured demo for a while, but in browse demos, you can see there are like 212 open source code samples that you have. And because this is also SDKs, let's just filter that based on only code samples. And what you can see are different samples for different products. So it's not just limited to Lightning Web Components. Now you actually have code samples for MuleSoft, Service Cloud, and even Apex. For example, if you're looking to create an async trigger framework, you need not again work from scratch. You have a code sample right here. So some of these are full-fledged apps and they have LWC components built into them. If you look at the description, you will easily get to know. So some things off the top of my head is Dreamhouse, e-bikes, and then easy spaces. So wherever you find Lightning Web Components in the description, it means it's like a fully functional demo that you can actually look at and see how things are working. So explore all of these in your free time. But today I'm going to cover 3 of them. So first I'm going to cover e-bikes, that is like this featured demo. So if you click on explore on GitHub, you will be taken right to the GitHub repository. So as you can see, everything is open source. You can look at the code. And in the README, you can see instructions on how you can install this app in different orgs. So ideally, some of these demo apps are not meant to be installed on production because these are demo apps, obviously. But you can definitely install them in your sandbox or a scratch org and then look at the code, copy paste some of the code into your own projects. All of that is okay. But generally be aware, don't install this on production. Unless you think your use case is exactly the same, you can use all of the code, then maybe yes. So once you follow these instructions, it'll easily go through. Nothing much very complex here. We've ensured that there are no errors. So once you install all of this, you will be able to run this app. So what eBikes typically shows is it's a pure Lightning Web Components project. So it's not at all fancy. It does very basic things that cover almost everything that you have learned in all of these 4 days. So once you install the eBikes into Scratch or wherever it is, you will come to this app. Basically, you will find it in the apps called eBikes. So once you click on that, you will come to this app. And first, let's see the Product Explorer tab. So what you will see here are 3 different tiles on screen. So first thing is you have a bunch of filters. So here you can change the filter, maybe change the slider, and then you can see that this list immediately changes. Okay, and then you have different categories, which are checkboxes essentially. So you uncheck a box, the results are shown accordingly. And here the list is paginated. So here you're seeing two pages. If you click here, you'll see the second page. And if you want to look at the details, you can click on any of the tile, and then the right side component is going to refresh and show you the details automatically. So that is how this basic Product Explorer tab works. So does anyone want to unmute themselves? Is there ability for people to unmute?
No, we cannot, like, they cannot unmute, but they can ask in chat.
Okay. So yeah, I was just wanting to ask people if, so let's take the filter component, for example. Can you put in the chat on how do you think this slider and checkboxes have been implemented? And after that, how do you think the moment I'm changing the slider in this component is automatically getting refreshed? Same is the case here. I'm clicking here, some other component is reacting to that. So how do you think both of these have been implemented? Can I see the chat? Yeah, I can see. Okay. Yeah, you can deploy this to your personal dev org with Lightning components like Lightning checkbox. Using PubSub, these components are communicating with LMS or PubSub. Okay. I think you guys got the gist. Basically, the communication here is using Lightning message service. PubSub is kind of an old technology now. When Lightning Web Components was launched earlier, like 3 years ago, we didn't have Lightning message service, which is why PubSub was an interim alternative. But now I don't think you need to use PubSub anymore, unless there is some random place where Lightning message service is not supported. So yes, you are right. We have used base components. And if you look at the source code of e-bikes, so this is the product filter component. So this is the output. So for that, you can see we've used different base components. So for example, first we use the Lightning card with the title, filters, icon name, and all of that. And we used base components like Lightning input, Lightning slider, and again, we used Lightning input of type checkbox to render this UI. So we've extensively used base components, and that is what we also want to push for. So instead of using standard HTML like import checkbox and implementing your own solutions, just look at base components. And wherever possible, try and use base components. That is what we have done here. So here you can see all of these things in action. So if true, for each. So the way we are just showing one checkbox here, but it is put inside a loop, which is why multiple checkboxes are rendered. So all of that, you get the gist. I'm not going to dive very deep into all of these details. It's just like an overview of what are these sample apps out there and how you can explore them. You can dive deep after the session, and then you reach out to me if you have any doubts. So if you look at the product JS, so there are a couple of things that we have used here. First, in order to get the pick list values, we have used the wire decorator. So there are multiple wire decorators we used to get multiple pick list values. So what we have done here is on the product object, whatever are the pick list values, we try to render them as checkboxes here. So that is why there are multiple wire decorators that we have used to get different pick list values. And then what else? So here you can see a lot of JavaScript being used. So the reason I want to point this out is, so this is not like JavaScript that as a beginner you would use. So these are essentially methods and modules from ECMAScript 6 and more. So for example, .map is a function that lets you map items. It lets you convert an array into a different array. So we have used all of these different kinds of functions. So check it out. So for example, filter is one more method that JavaScript gives, which allows you to filter a list and return a different list. So how that is done is what you can see. So each and every line that we write, we follow best practices. So the moment you look at something, it is using all the best practices possible. And for example, here is what we call the debouncing strategy. So what happens is, for example, let's say you're searching for Electra. You don't fire an API request or an Apex request each time a letter is input. For example, you have written the event on key up. So if you type Electra, there are like 7 letters in that. So 7 requests are going to be sent to the server, which is not good for performance because the user is still typing something. Why do you want to keep sending requests until the user finishes typing? So that is what is called debouncing method, where we actually wait for a given amount of time for the person to stop typing and then only fire the request. So here, for example, we are waiting for 350 milliseconds. So if I stop typing, it's going to wait for 350 milliseconds and then fire the request. So that is again another best practice that we typically advocate for whenever you're trying to fire an API request or an Apex request on key up. So try to use this debouncing strategy. So that is the product filter. And of course, like you mentioned, we are using Lightning Message Service. So we have imported the relevant modules, the message channels, in order to fire a request from this component that is going to be heard by the product tile list component. So this is the product tile list component. And we are going to subscribe to that particular Lightning Message Service message from this component. And everything else, like you can see, we have used the API decorator and the wire decorator. Everything is in use. What else is there here? Yeah, that's pretty much it actually. So explore this in order to know how things have been implemented. For example, pagination is a thing that is interesting. So if in case you are looking to implement pagination in your own projects, then you can definitely reuse this component. So the way pagination works here is that we take the page number, page size as inputs, and then whenever the previous and next buttons are clicked, we only just dispatch an event called previous and next. And essentially, whatever component has to handle that, it is going to handle that request. So for example, previous page number, current page number. So here, so we have embedded the paginator component as a child component in the product tile list. And we are listening to those previous and next events. And whenever somebody is clicking on the next event, it is going to get handled by the product tile list in the handle next page, where we increment the page number. And based on the page number, the wire is going to get automatically fired. So that is because we have used this $sign in front of page number, which means it is a dynamic property. So whenever that property value changes, the wire is also automatically going to get fired. So that is how we have tied all of these things together. So the concepts that you've learned, like parent child. So how do you embed a child component inside a parent component? How do you listen to events from child in parent? And how do you ensure wire automatically gets fired whenever there is change in data? So all of these concepts you might have learned differently, but put together, you're going to get the paginator component. So that's basic. Why did I have this? Yeah. So again, there is a button somewhere, I don't know where, but if you click, I think it's in a different page. We can look at that also. So in this project, there is also orders. So you can create a new order. In just a second, I'll tell you why I'm creating a new order. Yes. So here you can see the same product tile list component that you've seen on the search results. But the difference here is that you can drag and drop this into this section. So how did we implement this drag and drop is again something that you can see in the product tile list page, not in the tile list page, but in the order builder, I'm assuming. Yes, in the order builder component, we have implemented this drag and drop. And keep in mind, we haven't used any third-party library for drag and drop. So HTML and the modern JavaScript have these capabilities inbuilt that can handle drag and drop. So we've just used the on drop and on drag over events in order to achieve this drag and drop. So take a look at the code. I can't walk you through all of this given the time that we have. So I'm just giving you an overview of what is possible and what has been implemented in the sample app. So you can drag and drop multiple products, and then you can change the quantity, you can delete them. So all of that is happening in this sample app. So take a look. This is one of the interesting use cases, which I'm assuming is interesting to you also. Now the second sample app that I want to show you is easy spaces. Now that is also going to be here somewhere. Yeah, easy spaces LWC. So it is also a very similar sample app, but here we are using the Lightning console in order to show different tabs. So in the end, there are components that do their own thing. It's up to you to explore the app and see what has been implemented and how it has been implemented. So why we created this app is to show two things. First, we wanted to show unlocked packaging, which is not the scope of today's session. The second thing is we wanted to show how you can use Lightning Web Components in flows. So for example, this is the reservation manager in the Easy Spaces app. And what you can do here is you can click on any of the leads and a flow is going to get invoked. And inside the flow, this is a Lightning Web Component that has been embedded. So I can click on draft reservation and then it goes to the next screen of the flow. So those of you who work with flows, you know that the previous and next buttons come as a part of the flow itself. So I can choose whatever I want. Again, this is a Lightning Web Component that has been embedded inside a flow. And then you can click next and it goes, the flow gets executed and it takes you to the record detail page. So this is that flow. So as you can see, the first screen was the customer detail screen. Inside that, reservation helper form is the Lightning Web Component that has been used. And to this Lightning Web Component, we are giving three inputs: record, ID, as object type, and state. And of course, there are outputs that this component gives, which is market ID, number of guests, reservation length, and start date. So this is not very new. Those of you who have worked with flows, you know that every component that you add to a flow, you can send inputs to it and you can get an output from it. So how was I able to achieve this with Lightning Web Components is what Easy Spaces is going to show you. First thing we have done is embedded an Lightning Web Component inside a flow. Second one is passed input parameters and we are getting output parameters. So it's actually pretty simple. So in Easy Spaces, this is your JavaScript file for the reservation helper form component that you've seen. And the major work happens in the meta file, as you know. So here I specified the target as Lightning Flow screen, and that's it. I can embed this component inside a flow. And using target configs, I'm able to expose properties as input and output variables for flow. So here you can see the different properties that I created in my JavaScript file, that is customer ID, object type, and all. They have been decorated with the API decorator, and I have exposed them as input properties by giving this role. So when I specify the role as input only, it is an input property. And if I say the role is output only, the property acts as an output. So that is that is what we wanted to show basically on how things work. And the other one is this component also uses these flow events. So what is happening in this helper form is there is this component customer detail form. If you open that, you can see that there is a button called draft reservation. If you remember, the first button I clicked was draft reservation and it automatically went to the next screen of the flow. I did not click on the previous and next buttons. So how did that happen? Is due to this flow navigation event. So right from within Lightning Web Components, you can fire that previous and next events that flow runtime is going to capture and navigate. So I've imported that event, and on click of draft reservation, I'm just dispatching that event, the new flow navigation next event. So this is something that Easy Spaces as a sample app is going to show you on how you can use flows and how you can use unlocked packages. Feel free to explore. There are different sections here, though. So there is a spaces designer as well. Same concept. There is a list that is shown on the left hand side. If you click on that list, a flow is going to get invoked. Again, this flow embeds a Lightning Web component. You can select something and do some work. Now, yeah, one more thing I forgot to show with the reservation manager is these two components. So as you can see here, this is a list of leads and this is a list of contacts. And both of them look very similar. So the logo is different, but the name, status, and email fields are the same, but they are showing different lists. Now, did we create two components for that? No. We have used the same component and we have made that component dynamic to react to the kind of input it is getting. So if you see, it's the customer list component. Both of them are customer list components, but we are passing a different input parameter called contact or lead. So what we also want to advocate for is reusability. So if you're building a component, see if you can reuse that component in multiple places. If you can, then make that component dynamic enough so that it can react and work in multiple scenarios instead of just creating more and more components with a lot of duplicate code. So here I'm sure all of you know about it because you've learned about it in the past 4 days, is that you can expose properties. Just like we have done for flows, we have exposed target configs, which is the S object property. You either select lead or contact, and based on lead or contact, we are going to fire the wire request by passing that as a parameter. So take a look again. I keep saying take a look, but I'm assuming you will. So that was the second sample app I wanted to show you. And the third sample app is eCars. It's kind of like a flagship these days. Nowadays, all of our demos that you see in keynotes, we use the eCars sample app. Where is that? Here. Now, why is eCars so special is because it doesn't just use Lightning Web Components on the Salesforce platform. It uses Lightning Web Components off the Salesforce platform. It's a complete Salesforce Customer 360 solution. So you can read all about it in the README. So what happens here is that there is an app that is running on Salesforce. There is an app that is running on Heroku. And what we also tried to simulate is this live car data. So eCars is all about the car showroom app. Okay. There is a fictional company called eCars that sells electric cars. So all of their sales process is managed in Salesforce. Now, there is a public facing website through which you as a customer can inquire about their car, and that is deployed on Heroku. Now, the moment a customer submits a request in Heroku, how is that data coming into Salesforce? That is what is shown here. So the Heroku web app, leads are getting created into your Sales Cloud. And we've also created these microservices on Heroku to create PDFs. So this was before Salesforce functions became GA. You could still invoke a Node.js service that is written on Heroku. So we've written something like that. It is hosted on Heroku, and then you are able to call that Node.js service to create a PDF, and that PDF is going to get automatically created in Salesforce. So there is this huge architecture that is involved, so I'm not going to dive deep. And we've also integrated what we call MQTT and Apache Kafka. The reason we've done that is we wanted to show that capability also, where how are you going to live stream data? The concept here is when a car is running, it emits different kinds of data, Internet of Things and all. So how are you going to capture all of that data into Salesforce? Let's say if a battery is not working properly, the car itself is going to send information to Salesforce saying that battery is not working, and it creates a case. So all of those use cases are sort of embedded in here. Now, if you deploy that again, it's the same. You have this car configurator, which is again a Lightning Web Component. You can select different exterior color, interior color. It's all a fancy demo. But in the end, if you look at the component, you'll know it is actually quite simple on how we've implemented it. Now, the reason I'm showing you this component is you can reuse the exact same component outside the Salesforce platform as well. So if you look at the source code behind eCars, so here is the car configurator component. So if you look at the HTML, it contains your template for each, it contains your formatted number, buttons, different sections. So all of this code is present. Now, along with Salesforce, here you also can find the code for the external Heroku facing app, which is a progressive web app as well. So in the SRC, if you look at the same car configurator component, you will see it is the exact same component that we've used, including these base components. So the base components, the code that you're using on Salesforce platform can be deployed as it is to Heroku with minor changes, of course. So how to do that? How is it that we were able to achieve this complete end-to-end use case by using different features of Salesforce like Lightning Web Components, Heroku, integrations, and all of that? eCars is one sample that I would recommend all of you to look at. Now, all of this is good and fancy, but what I want to show you is some other capabilities. You've seen how LWC as a whole works, but what you haven't seen is how we use third-party files and all of that. So if you look at, let's say, battery diagnostic, we show a chart. So how is it that we were able to show this chart? Is using a third-party library called chart.js, and we've imported that as a static resource. We've initialized it, and how are we able to render the chart is what you can learn by looking at this. And what we also have is real-time data. So like I mentioned, once the car is emitting the data, the real-time data is going to keep coming in and this thing get automatically refreshed. I haven't deployed that part, but once you complete a full deployment, you can actually see it in action where data keeps coming in from Heroku and the screen keeps automatically refreshing. Now, to achieve that, in Salesforce, to automatically refresh things in LWC, you don't need to do anything specific. But there are also these pure JavaScript concepts like servers and events and WebSockets. So typically, if you look at a chat application, how is it that once you send a message, you can see that the other person is typing and you can immediately see the other person's message that comes in automatically without you having to refresh the screen. So all of that is done using WebSockets. And that is what we have used here as well. So this is just an example to show you how can you use WebSockets within Lightning Web Components. So in the end, as you know, Lightning Web Component is nothing but JavaScript. It's a web standard. So anything web standards you should be able to use. So window.websocket totally works fine. And any new data that is coming in from Heroku is automatically going to get pushed to the web component. And once you are pushing that data to some property, the UI is automatically going to get re-rendered. So how does that end-to-end flow work is what you can definitely explore. WebSockets is actually fun to work with. I'm going to talk about a few more apps in this session. They also use WebSockets and servers and events in order to achieve this kind of push-based integration between two systems. So here, Heroku is pushing data to Salesforce, not to Salesforce technically, it is pushing data to your Lightning Web Component directly. So how does that push mechanism work? That we have used extensively in some other apps that I'm going to talk about. So those are the three apps that I wanted to highlight from the code samples. But like I mentioned, there are many more apps. Take a look and explore them and get crazy ideas. Now, a few other apps. If you remember in the beginning, I was mentioning use cases were supposed to be interesting. So I included a lot more interesting use cases that we have built. So these three are the projects that my team has built using Lightning Web Components open source. So once you're learning Lightning Web Components, you are now not restricted anymore based on where it is deployed. You can deploy it on Salesforce, you can deploy it on GitHub pages, you can deploy it on Heroku, wherever you want. So these three apps in specific I want to talk about. For all of the apps, again, everything is open source. You can look at these links and explore the app on your own time. But what I want to highlight here is what are the kinds of apps that we have built. So most of you know about Kahoot. It's like this quiz app that I'm assuming every one of you have used at least once till now. Now what we have done is we have built Kahoot on Salesforce. So here, if you can see, this is a Salesforce org in which the same Kahoot question is shown. On your mobile, the tiles are shown. How did we achieve this? How are we, again, this is a Salesforce app. On the mobile, you're using a Heroku app. So the moment you tap this button here, how are we sending that data to Salesforce? The moment I change the question here, so let's say after question number 1, I'm going to question number 2. How is the information that a new question needs to be pushed to all the devices? How did we do that? How is information being pushed and pulled between two devices is what you can see here. Of course, again, we have used Lightning Web Components across. So it's all pure Lightning Web Components. And of course, Apex is involved. HTTP callouts are involved. WebSockets are involved. So a fully functional working app that you can use. As a matter of fact, last year, some of the community groups have used this to host their quizzes instead of Kahoot. Now, a similar app again is the Planning Poker app. So in typical agile projects, this is how estimations are done, where you show a user story on the screen and different people say how long it takes, and you take a consensus on who it's an average basically. So if 10 people are there, 2 people say it takes 2 hours, 4 people say it takes 4 hours, you kind of average it out. So for all of that, again, we have built this Planning Poker app for your agile estimations. It's again open source. It uses the exact same concepts of the Kahoot quiz app. So even this Planning Poker app has a Heroku website, which is optional. But in here, again, we are using the same push and pull techniques, and it is all Lightning Web Components. And the third one is the Emote Widget, is what we call it. So basically, what this does is you can embed it on any website. And once you click on, this is basically, it allows you to react, share your emotions of something that is happening on screen. So let's say this session is happening, and then on the website itself, you can see this Emote Widget. You can click it, you say, okay, congratulations, or claps. So this is again pure Lightning Web Components hosted on Heroku. So you can explore how things work. Then coming to the next place, I already mentioned about App Exchange before. So App Exchange typically has tons of apps, it has tons of components, but not all of them are open source or free. So there is a, I don't know how to call it, but Salesforce Labs is kind of like a vendor created inside App Exchange, which is essentially a public facing front for all of the Salesforce employees to put their apps. So as you know, if you want to put an app on App Exchange, you need to have a company and all of that. So Salesforce Labs is that company for Salesforce employees. So every single app in Salesforce Labs is free and it is open source. So we wanted to give all of you the ability to install an app and use it by default. But in case you want to customize it further, we made it open source and we made it free so that you can customize it and deploy and make it your own. So just go to App Exchange and type in Salesforce Labs on Google. You should get the links. Nothing much on that. There are so many apps, I think. You can, in fact, you'll be surprised with the number of components that we have built for Salesforce Labs. Now, in that, I want to highlight two of them. First is Kickboard. Now, the reason I wanted to mention Kickboard is it is one of the most recent apps that I personally have worked on. A blog post about it is coming out soon to show you how it works, what all we have used, and all of that. But basically, Kickboard is a whiteboarding application. So you know about Google Jamboard or PowerPoint or wherever you can add sticky notes, right? So we have built that on Salesforce because we wanted to make it free. We did not want people to use licenses in order to have a collaborative whiteboard discussion. So what you see on screen is a whiteboard. I can actually show a demo. So this is that whiteboard. Um, there are different boards with different backgrounds we've created. This background, this canvas itself is actually infinitely scrollable. So you can keep adding how many other sticky notes you want. Double click somewhere, add new note, change the color to whatever you want, and save. So the note is typically added, and then you can clone that note. So basically do whatever you want. Now here also it is collaborative again. So I can share this board with 2-3 people, and once that 2-3 people add new notes, my screen is automatically refreshed to show those new notes. So how did we achieve all of this is again something that you can check out. And learn. Like I said, a blog post is coming out soon, so I'm not going to reveal much details about Kickboard right now, but just stay tuned. You can use it, explore it, make it your own. And then there is this cookie consent app that we have published last year. So as you know, we have rolled out a new library in Lightning last release that allows you to capture consents from users. So instead of you having to implement all of that UI, storing that consent and acting on it, so instead of you having to go through all of that process, we have, again, as usual, built this app. You can just use it as it is. So you can see we already have this fancy UI and all, which you can directly place in your communities, which helps you manage cookies. Basically, consent is what you can manage. And I need not stress about the fact that consent is important given the compliance requirements of all the different countries in recent times. So this is another use case that you can look at to see how things are built. Now, using LWC with third-party apps. So this is something that I wanted to highlight both as an interesting use case and as a tip on how you can actually get started with web components easily. So all of you know that in case you want to create a web component, you need to go to the command palette and say create Lightning web component. It's going to ask you, let me go ahead and create one. I'm going to ask you a few details and that's it. A component is going to get created with a blank meta file, a blank JS file, and a blank HTML file. So typically this is okay to get started with, but as you're working on projects, let's say you're only creating components that have to be shown on the Lightning app page. So every time you have to create a component, you'll go to the meta file, change this to true, and then copy the target and target configs, which is a lot of work. So what we have done is we have built something called as LWC Builder. So once you install that, it's a VS Code extension. So once you install that extension, it comes to you in the command palette itself. So you can just say, instead of create Lightning web component, you can say open LWC Builder. And what it shows you is kind of like a very fancy UI with all the different properties. So you can say hello again. API version, you can check this box to say is exposed is true or not. You can give a description. You can optionally create a CSS file. Where do you want to use the component? Do you only want to use it on mobile and not on desktop? And in case you've chosen app page, what are the different property names? Is it available on this target? What is the type? Is it required? So a lot of details that you can just give in. And at the bottom, it's going to show a preview of how your component is going to look like. So if you look at the JavaScript file, you can see I've created a public property. So it's automatically imported the API decorator, and it's going to show me, it's going to create that property for me. The CSS file is created by default. And in the meta file specifically, you can see is exposed is already marked to true, label is given, targets are given, target config is given. So everything that I've selected here is shown as a preview. And all I need to do is click this button, create. And as you can see in my project, the hello again component is created with all the different things that I want. So it's made my job of working with Lightning Web Components much easier, because for all of this, I typically have to go back to the documentation and copy paste stuff, but now I don't need to do that anymore. So this is a handy little tip I wanted to give on how you can use this LWC Builder as a VS Code extension. And as you can see, it is open source. And the best part about this is this UI, whatever you're seeing on screen, is actually built with Lightning Web Components itself. So we have used Lightning Web Components to create Lightning Web Components. So this is very meta. Now you can explore the source code for that. Again, you can see how we have implemented this. How are we able to embed this Lightning Web Component inside a VS Code extension? All of that you can explore using this link. All of this, by the way, if you just know the name, you can Google it. You need not remember all of these links. So whatever components I've shown you, as long as you remember the names, you can just Google for them and you will get the links because it is all public. So definitely check out LWC Builder. The UI itself is not going to be very difficult for you to understand. But what is interesting is how we have embedded that inside a VS Code extension. So that's something that I want all of you guys to go back and explore. Now, this is something I've been doing over last year. I don't know how many of you tuned in, but we have launched this series, or rather a talk show called Dev Talkies, where we invite a couple of guests, we share news, we share useful tips, and we also play games. So what I have done over the course of last year is, for many episodes of this talk show, we've built games for people to play. And all of these games have been built with Lightning Web Components. So the first thing is the classic snake game. So as you see on the screen, the GIF is playing. So this is a typical snake game that you used to play as children on mobile. So how can we implement that using Lightning Web Components is something that I have tried to show 2 years ago. Now, the reason I want to, the reason I did this was, first, it is interesting, and second one is to render this kind of UI on the screen continuously, so the snake is moving every millisecond. So how are we dealing with performance? Because there are a lot of elements, there are a lot of HTML elements rendered on the screen. How are we able to achieve this smooth motion? How is it automatically re-rendering? Why is it not causing any performance issues? So what are the tips and tricks that I have given out? So check that out. Again, it is open source. The source code is open source. And in the README file, you'll also find a link to the YouTube video where I have created this from scratch. So it's actually a live coding session. So I've started with a blank project and we end with this kind of a UI. And over the steps, over the course of the episode, I tell you how we have implemented things. What are the design decisions that have been taken to ensure this works perfectly? So all of that has been explained. And there is this other games that I've created. Type shift, essentially you can drag and drop these columns. You can slide these columns up and down to create different words. And once you form a word, it tells you if the word is correct or not. Now, those are just very simple games that I have built. Then word search, which is typically like your crossword puzzle that you solve on papers. So there is a grid with a bunch of different letters. You need to find how many words are there. How did we implement that? Then there is match the following. It's another game. All of these are single player games, so you can actually play it by yourself. What I've also built are multiplayer games. For example, Choice Overload. It's like Kaun Banega Crorepati. Okay, a question is shown, four options are shown, but it's multiplayer. So multiple people can give an answer, and depending on who selects which option, I will be able to see their names on the screen here. Beside the option, I can see who all selected this option. And finally, I reveal the answer. Whoever is correct, they get points. If theirs is wrong, they won't get points. So how did I achieve that? Again, if you go back to the Planning Poker or Kahoot style app, I'm pushing and pulling information from two different systems, two different devices rather. So again, here I've used server sent events and HTML session storage. A lot of different concepts. I don't want to overwhelm you, but I just want to give you what are all the sample applications available out there that you can use to explore different possibilities. And finally, the most recent grand finale episode of Dev Talk is we have used trading cards. I distribute cards between different people. Everybody deals their own card. And then finally, whoever wins, they get all the cards. So all of the different mechanisms of how cards are shuffled between different people, and how am I pushing that information onto everybody's screen that, okay, you're left with two cards. This is the card that the other person has dealt. So it's that kind of a game that I have built. Again, everything is pure Lightning Web Components. Not even in the Snake game, I haven't used HTML5 canvas. So it's like pure HTML and JavaScript. So you can definitely go and explore. You did not even learn about Canvas API or anything anywhere. So that's pretty much it. I was given like, I thought I'll do this over 1 hour and leave the remaining time for questions, because that is more important, answering your questions, because I can't explain all of this in one session anyways. You have to check it out on your own. I just wanted to give you a glimpse. But before I go to questions, developer.salesforce.com, all of you already go to. So I'm not going to talk about that a lot. Most importantly, I want to focus on Salesforce developers channel on YouTube. So a lot of videos are posted on there. Like we do live sessions, we show pre-recorded videos. There is a lot of helpful tips we give out, and we also launched this thing called as quick takes, which is like a topic explained in 10 minutes. So you don't even need to spend and sit in a 1 hour webinar to understand that topic. So a lot of stuff is going on the Salesforce developers YouTube channel. So definitely go to that channel and subscribe, so that whenever we do a session, whenever we launch a new video, you get notified. So that's pretty much it. That is what I wanted to cover as a part of interesting use cases for Lightning Web Components. So now I'm open to questions. I will look at the chat now and see if you had any questions. Okay, Prakash, it is good that you've used 2 Salesforce labs and customized it according to the client's needs. Thank you. I see a lot of appreciation, so thank you. I'm glad that you people liked the session. LWC OSS is a short form for Lightning Web Components open source. So Lightning Web Components as a framework itself, we have open sourced it so that you can use it anywhere. And you can actually, in fact, contribute to Lightning Web Components also. If there are any issues you find, you can go to the LWC GitHub page and you can file issues, or you can submit pull requests to enhance the product. So typically, to differentiate between Lightning Web Components on platform and Lightning Web Components that are deployed off platform, we use this terminology called OSS, which is what I have used. Are you also giving prize money in KBC? I wish I could, but there's a lot of legal requirements involved to give out prize money, so no. Can we call LWC component in a record triggered flow? I'm not really sure, because record triggered flow is something that is going to run in the background. Lightning Web Components is a UI framework. So you typically need to have a UI for LWC to work. And because a record triggered flow runs in the background, you will not be able to use it there. Um, so what is the best way to get started? I think this session is a good way. This bootcamp that both Isha and Payal are running is an excellent way to get started with Lighting Web Components. And like I mentioned, theoretically, you will be able to see demos from all of the great speakers that you had and on YouTube and all of that. But in order for you to really practice, like I mentioned in the beginning, explore the open source apps. Try to build whatever they have built on your own. So just look at the end output and try to build it on your own. And if you're stuck somewhere, you can obviously refer to the code because it's all open source. So that's the best way to get started. Okay. So any more questions? Okay. I think, um, yeah, Manish's question is being answered. So Isha and Payal, back to you.
There for the informative session. Guys, your learning doesn't stop here. I've shared the Salesforce developer YouTube link. Aditya, that's right, correct. Uh, it's right. It's the correct one, right?
Um,
The
let
YouTube channel.
Yeah, it is the correct one. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so guys, this is the Salesforce developer playlist, the YouTube channel where what Aditya was talking about, wherein you'll get all the recordings, beginners, developer quick takes, everything that you need. You can just have a look out there. And as Aditya mentioned, if you have any feedback, want to talk anything around LWC product, so feel free to reach out. And all these sessions till date are recorded. These 6 days of LWC learning. So stay tuned. The link is same. The playlist, the LWC learning. Uh, day 5 is all